Welcome to another episode of Bringing Down the Grindhouse, a podcast where we discuss horror in media. And tonight, grab your broomsticks and subvert your expectations as we delve into the Neon Demon and the Love Witch. I'm Mitch.
I'm Murr.
I'm Justine.
And I'm Jonathan.
Cool. So these were my picks for the week, and I'm pretty excited to talk about both of these. I wanted to choose these movies because I don't often see horror movies that are starring females, especially in these sort of roles that they play. It also plays a lot on social expectations of women and our perceptions of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So, with that being said, I think I'd like to start with the Neon Demon tonight. How do you guys feel about that?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I'm about it.
All right, so what were your initial thoughts on this movie?
I thought the Neon Demon had a very visually pleasing aesthetic, and it very much made me scared of not only like the expectations of people, but specifically women in the modeling industry. I felt very uncomfortable, and I felt like I was very much in the shoes of the main character the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, welcome to the cult of fashion.
Ah, yes.
Yes, the blood cult of fashion was indeed what we got.
Some blood magic
roped
going
into
on.
this
Yeah.
movie. It reminded me a lot of Suspiria.
Definitely.
Really on like the choice of colors.
The visual aspect, I think that was probably my favorite part about this movie, is it's so visual. It's like obviously an art house film.
Oh yeah, this is like on the extreme end of being an art house film because of the visuals they chose. Just the color palette that they decided to use when she was like going to the club for the first time, and they have their like suspension show that's happening, and it's just like a strobe light that's happening as you get to see their responses to what's happening. And then the like actual runway show itself, which is fucking awesome.
Oh yeah.
Just to see like her, we'll get to it, but like initial impressions, it's aesthetically pleasing, and I think it's heavily underrated. It's a really, really good piece of cinematography at the very least.
Yeah, this movie didn't do that great in the box office, but
No.
we're going to get to that. So, The Neon Demon is directed by Nicholas Winding Refn. He is I believe he's Danish, I think. Yeah, he's a Danish film director and screenwriter. He's known for doing Drive, also Bronson, if you guys are familiar with those.
Yep.
Yeah.
Highly stylized.
Yes, very much so. This movie stars Elle Fanning, and she plays a 16-year-old model, aspiring model, that leaves her little small town of Georgia and moves to the big city of Los Angeles in pursuit of her modeling career. And
starts off
dreams.
very like typical and cliche.
Yeah.
Like, this is like the story you've heard in all the coming of age stories.
It really couldn't have been more simple and straightforward than what they did in the very beginning.
Right. Let's see. So this movie came out in 2016. It was co-written by Mary Laws, Polly Stenham, and stars Elle Fanning and Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves. Yeah, he's in this movie.
Yeah.
Kind of a small-ish character, but he's very creepy.
Yeah,
Very
I
effective.
had never seen Keanu Reeves in a role like this before. He's always a good guy. You kind of feel for him no matter what. But in this case, I was like, oh.
He's just a terrible person in this
Yeah.
one. There is nothing redeeming about this man.
This is like seeing Jake Gyllenhaal on Nightcrawler for the first time.
Oh, yeah, that was
Where you see him just be a
weird.
fucked up person, and you're like, I was not expecting this kind of
But he
performance
was so
from this
good at
actor.
it.
Yeah, he was really good at
I mean,
being
the
creepy.
same thing happened to me when I saw 10 Cloverfield Lane with
Oh,
John Goodman.
yeah, with John
Yeah.
Goodman.
That
That's
fucking
so
fucks
good.
me up, dude.
Yeah, it really does.
So this film had premiered at the 2016 Cannes Film Festival, and it was then released in France, then Denmark, and then finally the United States. The budget was around $7 million for this, but the box office revenue only reached about $3.4 million.
Yeah,
So,
no one wanted to pick it up.
Yeah,
They
it
didn't want to
wasn't
distribute
quite
it.
a favorite, but it's understandable, I guess, because there's a lot of very uncomfortable moments. I mean, this whole movie makes you feel uncomfortable, even though it's talking about beauty, which is supposed to be a very pleasing, comfortable kind of thing, you know?
Refn, the director, is not new to film failures either.
Yeah, that sucks.
He, like, for the first 2 or 3 Pusher movies, he was in about $6 million in debt for each movie, and they even made documentaries around that time, and like the amount of stress that you could see on him, that's why he pushed to make different stuff. I know that in this movie particularly, he wanted to explore something and do something he's never done before.
Right. I was looking into a little bit about his inspiration for writing this, and it was kind of funny. In an interview, he said that he's never really felt like he was beautiful, like visually beautiful. And he wanted to explore the concept of beauty, but not in a way to criticize beauty, but rather to explore it as a complex topic, which I believe beauty definitely is a complex subject.
He also mentions he got a lot of inspiration from his wife, who he thinks is like the most beautiful person ever.
Isn't that sweet?
And like, I think this is the only movie that I think this is his wife's favorite movie, is what she mentioned as well.
Yeah.
Like it's the most like proud. I mean, she's most proud of this movie out of all the movies that he's made.
It's really good, and it's why we're talking about it, because there's a lot of layers to go through on the film that you might have just missed the first time through because of what was going on visually.
Mm-hmm. So that's something I wanted to talk about, is the implicit and explicit nature of the scenarios in this movie. I personally feel like a lot of this movie was very implicit. Like, they never exactly show everything fully or explain everything fully. It's kind of up to you to fill in the pieces. And in a way, I feel like it made it all the more uncomfortable to watch.
They pushed the uncomfortable scenes into a surreal space to make it seem like you weren't exactly seeing what was happening. There was more that was happening, and that you may not necessarily know what's going on when it's happening. And this added to the whole surrealism that extends through the entire film.
Right. So how do you feel this presentation of the scenarios made you like observe the situations?
So, as far as the film being mostly implicit, I agree with that, though there are some things that are just explicitly said
definitely.
or explicitly shown, such as like the ending scene. She's like, she's inside of me and she's trying to get out, sort of idea. But then you have the runway scene, what we were talking about, where it's really like the perspective on this is very, very, it's very implicit in that she is falling in love with herself while doing this runway moment.
Yeah,
as well.
that was something that we were talking about. We were talking about the runway scene a lot after we watched it, and it reminded us both of the story of Narcissus.
Yes.
In ancient mythology, and Narcissus basically fell in love with his reflection and eventually fell into the water and drowned, which is kind of noted at the end of the movie.
I thought he starved to death.
There's a few versions of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in all of them, the reason why is
Because he's
self-deprecating.
so
Yeah.
Because he becomes obsessed with himself. This is like one of the key moments in the movie, because this is like her transformation, her rebirth, sort of. Also her initiation into like the cult of what is fashion in their world.
Yes.
And how it connects to them like being witches and the occult and like other pagan symbols that you might see throughout it, including that triangle that's like behind her.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to
the
mention
triangle.
that because like throughout the movie, she is this small girl from Georgia. She's 16. She's in a new area, doesn't know anybody.
She's very
But-
mousy and shy.
She gets that first push when the person's like, just lie about your age, and then you could work with these people. And she gets handpicked by that guy to do the gold scene. And after that, that is like the pushing point where her journey starts. Well, not really starts, but the tipping point. Because then after that, she feels more confident for herself. She like glosses over the other fucking model that was like, who was hating her at the party.
Right.
Basically, I heard your fucking parents are dead.
Oh
Just
my
like-
Yeah,
god.
I believe that was Sarah.
Slights her just a little bit, and she's like, "Hey, I heard your parents are fucking dead," and you're like, "Oh my god!"
Just like the savagery
Yeah.
among these women, like, oh my
By
gosh.
the way, this character, Sarah, is played by Abby Lee Kershaw, who is actually a well-known model.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Shit.
they had actual models in these roles.
All right. Damn. So that must have been extra like tough for them to go through some of these things,
And
'cause
very
it's real.
personable, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if the co-writers for this script were also had some connections to the modeling industry, or at least studied it somewhat.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like they really did their research as far as like what sort of feeling embodies being in the fashion industry. It's very obsessive and it's very competitive, and that can translate in a lot of different ways.
So there's two things that you guys brought up while you were discussing just now. The first was that she's very innocent, the main character, and she arrives in Los Angeles, but there's a guy that she's seeing who's totally okay with the fact that she's underage.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's
And
very
he's meant to
creepy.
be like the like relaxed, like not so bad character, but he's still dating her.
Yeah, that's kind of the interesting part about this movie, I felt, is that who you think the antagonist is shifts constantly throughout the movie. At the beginning, when I first watched it, I thought that her little boyfriend was definitely like an antagonist. Just with that opening scene where they were doing the photo shoot and she was laying on the couch, fake dead.
So that's great. So we really should rewind just a little bit.
Yeah.
So in the start, you see her on a couch, which looks like she's bleeding out from her neck. She's essentially dead on a couch. And it's important to note that because the movie starts there and ends there. So you kind of get foreshadowing and tone set up right at the beginning for how the movie's going to play out. And then the boyfriend, to me, sort of represented like what society might see as normal a lot of the time, which is that most men will date younger than themselves. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it was very extreme because she's underage. And most people won't really bat an eye at that whenever they see couples that are like that. And they won't say anything about it. So that was like the movie's bar for what is normal. And then it moves on from there.
Or how like beauty can be an indicator of age to some people.
Also
as
that.
well.
Yeah,
like,
definitely. I'm not saying that I'm particularly beautiful, but I remember being very young, and I used to have a lot of people assume that I was older just because I looked a certain way. I had more fuller features or this, and that, you know.
The other thing that you guys had mentioned was the scene where she has a private photography session with that one photographer who covers her in gold paint. Right. And this scene is super important because you had mentioned something about it. You want to explain, or you want me to?
What did I mention about it?
Well, okay, I'll go into it. So this scene, he tells everybody to leave. And it's only him and her in this, and he tells her immediately to remove her clothes. So you're already getting allusions to like what happens in certain castings, where it's like they're trying to see like what are the limits of the model and what can they do privately, so that they could like climb some sort of social ladder. And this entire scene is meant to make you feel uncomfortable as she feels in the scene, because he's slathering paint all over her, touching her inappropriately, but there's no nudity.
Yeah, that was something you had mentioned as we were watching this, is that the director made a point not to explicitly show any nudity.
Yeah, so there's no nudity for the sake of looking at a naked woman's body for pleasure.
There's only nudity at the end when they're washing the blood off of themselves, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, right. Well, even then, that's not a comfortable scene to watch.
Yeah, because they're literally covered in blood.
Yeah.
Also, specifically, Elle Fanning is 16 years old in this role when she started filming the movie.
Oh, so she's 16 in real life, too.
And then midway through, she turned 17. And when it premiered, she was finally 18.
Holy shit.
Wow.
So that just adds more on top of it. The main piece here is that this was a movie that used something that I've mentioned before on film, which is the idea of the male gaze. So things are made specifically so men can enjoy it, which is usually nude women. In this case, there is no nudity unless you're uncomfortable at the same time. So you're uncomfortable then, you're uncomfortable when those women are covered in blood. And I think there was one more scene where, when she's laying on her back in front of the moon.
Oh, yeah.
And she like menstruates out onto the floor.
I want to talk about that later.
Yeah.
I got something about that.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that one. So that's the point, is that all of them were made to make you feel uncomfortable and to understand that these moments happen consistently. And then they're made to think that it's normal, that like this is something that the photographer just does because it's like his method.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was very Los Angeles-y, which makes sense. Like, he doesn't say hi. He doesn't look at people until they're introduced.
It's wild.
He's wearing super nice Nikes. Like,
He's wearing super nice Nikes. That's funny.
And like, he will fire or put someone on immediately if it seems fit to him.
Right.
I really like the idea of these three women hovering over this one girl, because she has what they don't have.
Natural beauty.
And she even mentions it, like, oh, do you think like I should go back to my fucking my surgeon, Andrew? I mean, he does amazing work. He's done like 7 or 8 operations. She's like, why would you do that?
Yeah, so that was interesting in the three main antagonists, is how they present beauty. Now, there's Ruby, who is the makeup artist.
Yeah.
And she's essentially the leader of their coven, per se.
Yeah.
And I feel like I wouldn't say that she's ugly. I think she's actually very attractive, but she's not a model.
No,
and so in a way,
makeup.
The beauty that she presents or pretends to present is internal beauty. She's very kind and gentle and is trying to help this girl out, give her a helping
personable.
hand.
She's like the buffer between like models and like photographers. She even does that when she first introduces her and wants to stay, like, even though he's asked everybody to leave.
Yeah, and then there's Sarah, who hasn't really had much work done, or at least she doesn't talk about it. And I feel like in a way she represents natural beauty, but what's on the inside isn't as beautiful as what's on the outside. And
She's
that's
rotten
where,
on the inside.
yeah, that's where the clash comes. And then there's Gigi, the last one, who is the plastic surgery queen. So she represents manufactured beauty.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the big thing with Sarah is that, yes, she is beautiful and she's a great model, but she will never be the fresh thing on the corner because the
Right.
new thing is coming out.
Yeah, I'm
Did
sure
that
at
being
some
Jessie.
point. Yeah, at some point she was probably in Jesse's position, and
Yeah.
she was hot shit, you know. But as we all know, or hopefully some of us do understand, that when it comes to things like the modeling industry, you're only hot while you're a topic. You know, as soon as people stop talking about you, you become irrelevant, and that's the case in a lot of celebrity statuses. People who are musicians, actors. When you're not hot, you know, no one really pays attention to you. You become a ghost, like she mentions in one line.
Well, they mentioned at some point that this time frame that you're talking about is very short. Like, I think they said if you're over what age?
21.
21.
Yeah.
And then they were also talking about how like the girl was buying whale fat for her skin. And one of them scoffed because it's like, why do that? You know, when, I mean, she was like, I can't believe it. Can you believe trying to continue in this line after the age of 21? And then the male like makeup artist was like, try 20.
Yeah. Yeah, that was brutal
Yeah.
just to hear them just blatantly talking about stuff like that. We've also talked about this comparison of like the newest person on the block in what was the Black Swan, where the comparison is made that the new girl doesn't look like she's faking it when she's enjoying her time dancing. In the same way, they see her having this natural beauty and just being a natural at being a model. And they're all envious of that sort of like abilities, like quote unquote ability, because she even mentions herself that she's not good at anything else, but she knows that she's attractive and she's using that to make money.
Right. So that makes me wonder, how do you guys feel about beauty? Do you think that beauty is an important quality in a person? And how do you perceive beauty? Is your perception of beauty the same as someone else's?
I personally feel that beauty, like the boyfriend thing, is in the beholder. I mean, beauty is a thing that you see on face value. And I believe that people have much more to offer than just their looks. Although it depends on what you're asking, because if I'm talking to a person of the same sex or the same gender, typically I don't really care what they look like. They're just going to be someone I know. But
Right, it's like
if
an
we're talking
inherent
about
thing.
opposite sex, people that I'm attracted to personally, I mean, beauty does play a factor. It is in the rules of attraction, beauty will always be a factor no matter where you are on the spectrum.
That makes me think of something. In a class that I take, we were talking about the science of beauty and what is beauty. Can it be defined? And essentially what beauty comes down to is normalcy. So if you are normal looking, if you're symmetrical,
Yeah.
basically, then you're
Symmetry has a
considered
lot to do
beautiful.
with it.
Symmetry is beauty. And a lot of times it comes down to just genetics, and that's not really something we have control over.
I feel like it's changed for me since I got older. So like when I was like 16 to like 18, maybe even like 19 and 20, it was very superficial. Like I was looking for a specific kind of person for what they looked like or what I thought was attractive. But the thing is that I had influence from my parents as well, where like my mom very explicitly told me she did not want me to date white people. She was like, she's like, I don't want any white people within the family. And so she had a very like distinct thing that she had told me about what not to do. And so that was kind of like the beginning of where I had started. So I was looking for people who were not white. And like, it sounds funny, but it's because of a larger problem that she was seeing with like growing up herself, which was the big cultural difference as far as like they may not understand how certain families are, and so they'll have a tougher time integrating into your family. Because what's the ultimate goal for like Hispanic families? They want you to have kids and get married and like get into and be able to like bring in someone who's going to be fitting into the family really well. And so originally it was very superficial, like who would be the ideal person that would fit into this category. And then as I got older, I realized that a lot of the people that I met that I thought were really attractive, there wasn't a lot of substance behind it. I found often that people who were really, really attractive used that to their advantage on every place they could and often didn't have any other skills.
And that's actually something that Elle Fanning mentions in the beginning of the movie when she's out on her first date with her boyfriend, or I wouldn't really say he's her boyfriend, but she says, you know, I don't really have any skills. I can't dance. I can't act. I'm not really good at anything, but I'm pretty.
Yeah.
And that pays.
Yep.
I wanted to ask you a question, John. Do you feel that if someone is by all means beautiful, we're talking like if we were to put it on a scale of 1 to 10, an actual 10, but their heart and their intention inside their heart is not good, do you find that person unattractive?
Oh, yeah, totally. I've met people who are insanely attractive, but their personality makes them really rotten.
Or they're shallow.
Oh, yeah.
Or, it makes you change your perception about it. Like, yeah, you're beautiful, but your heart is black, and I don't support you.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean,
what do you think?
I mean, beauty. It depends on what purposes are we looking at beauty for. You know what I mean? 'Cause are we looking at it? Are we picking a sexual partner? Are we picking
Right.
somebody to represent a brand or something like that? Are we
Right.
picking someone to put on the front of our magazine or whatever it is? So I guess it really comes down to like that. Like if I'm looking for
What's the purpose?
if I'm looking for someone to be in a relationship with, there like two things have to be met, like two categories. Like I have to be somewhat sexually attracted to them because that's important to me. And then at some level I also have to mesh with them on like a personal level, and I have to be able to have a communication and discuss ideas, and they also have to be a little open-minded perhaps, the relationship maybe not working as ideal as they want it to be. So that really, it comes down to its face value, and then it's also like what's going internally. But that's for relationships. Now, when it comes to brands, you're looking for symmetry. You're looking what's going to catch people's eye. You're going to look,
right?
And that just comes down to like that's just like capitalist, like
yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, there's
ideas.
a standard that they've set, and it's been consistent for however long. Like the fashion magazines have existed.
Right. And it's interesting that you guys mention basically consumerism in the world of beauty, because I feel like something that's touched on this very explicitly is how people who are in the beauty industry are themselves consumed, and in this case quite literally in the way of the movie.
Yeah, the word choice is specific when it talks about people who are consumers, in the same way that people who use, say, like Google or other things like that, they're users. The only time you reference somebody who's a user is someone who uses drugs and someone who uses technology. And it's mentioned specifically in like one of the documentaries I saw lately where that they do that because they want you to feel a certain way about using these items, where everything that the fashion industry comes out with, you are in fact consuming that. And then it got taken literally in the movie where they eat her at the end of the film. She became cannibalized by her other like her competition basically.
I mean, does anybody think now since this movie does harken back to like the Elizabeth Bathory story,
I was just about to mention,
and like our Hungarian like serial killer who bathed in virgin blood.
Yeah, I think she killed over 600 people.
Many people.
Yeah,
it's a great story,
and she used her position of power to do so.
Yeah.
There's a great Venom song about it. That's great. Anyway, but that's all I'll say about that. But yeah, but harkening back to that and like literally like consuming someone, but because virginity is a symbol of purity, right? Yeah. That's something that we all can all agree on. That's supposedly,
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of like symbology, typically that's how it's represented. So at the time, Ruby attempts to seduce her.
Yes.
Oh man!
And do you believe? I believe this, that Ruby was trying to save her from them by corrupting her.
In a way,
quote
yes.
unquote, corrupting her.
She was trying to bring her into the coven to join them.
Yeah, I think she really did start to feel for her and realize, wow, she's kind of a cool person.
That would have been like a sort of an initiation if she had agreed to a sexual encounter with her.
There was even a line in the beginning when they go to the party together, which is really Jesse's first experience of these people, and they're in the the bathroom doing their makeup.
Oh, you're talking about the fucking scene?
Yeah, she was like, well, there's also that, but when they're talking specifically about the lipstick, she asked if you had a color named after you, would you be food or would you be sex? Mm-hmm. And in the end, when the sex was rejected from Ruby, she became food.
Oh shit, I didn't even see that.
Yeah, that's real. It's also strong commentary about what they do as far as cosmetics go. Look at any piece of cosmetics and you'll see that the names are exactly what they described. It's either food or sex.
It's something desirable. Everybody needs to eat. Everybody loves food and everybody loves sex.
Well, people who designed makeup, they did it so that people would feel more attractive so they could get to these goals. At least that's the idea that they had come up with. Of course, it's become something that's different because people do makeup just for themselves. But the idea when they first made it was that so you could be more attractive to other people.
Yeah, but now we have, damn girl, you're a whole ass snack as a fucking line.
Yeah.
Literally food.
Literally. I mean, food is the one binding thing that everyone can all discuss every time.
Yeah.
Everyone will have an opinion about food.
Yeah,
and in a way,
elaborate.
It's the same thing with beauty. Everybody has their own opinion about beauty and their own unique perception about what is beautiful.
One thing I want to pull up, which I was not expecting, there's fucking necrophilia in this movie.
Yeah, shit.
That's right. Oh my god, how did I forget about oh my god, how did I forget about that?
She spit in the corpse's mouth.
Yeah.
She she put her tongue in there.
Ruby did.
Ruby put
yes.
her tongue in the dead person.
She was fantasizing about Jessie because she couldn't have her. And
she got rejected,
She got rejected. She even said, like, let me be your first.
Yeah.
And she got rejected hard, so that she took it out on this corpse, who I thought was her friend at first. She kind of looks like her friend.
Yeah, it did look like somebody who was very similar. It should be mentioned that while they were filming that scene, everything that happened during that scene was not planned. He had originally told her that just to give her a kiss and to, like, probably get on top. But apparently she got into the scene and he was like, yeah, just fucking spit in your mouth. And she did.
Yeah.
And it just kept going.
So when I was looking at something about this scene, this was only, like, the second scene that he had filmed with this actress.
Yeah.
So they didn't even really know each other that well.
Wild.
And then as things just carried on, he was like, you know what? Why don't you do this? And it just progressed to how it was.
Softcore porn.
They just roll in and he's like, all right, so there's this like fake corpse over here. I'm going to need you to climb on it and start making out with it. What's
really like crazy about that entire scene is like the set is an actual morgue and her manager is an actual mortician.
Yeah.
And as well as that, there was also another unplanned line in the movie that was delivered by Keanu Reeves.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when he talks about, that Lolita shit in room 14.
Wait, let's talk about Keanu Reeves for a second. His character was very unexpected. I think I had wanted to watch this movie specifically for Keanu Reeves. And then when I saw the character that he was playing, I did... wow.
He takes on the form of, like, one of the potentially most dangerous kind of men you can meet, who is not only facilitating bad things happening, he tells other people about it and expects them to be okay with it. Especially when he talks about, hey, you should go check out that room when there's like underage girls. And he specifically refers to the Lolita thing, which is like a whole category of internet porn that exists.
Not even that. It was just reference to the movie originally that was made by Stanley Kubrick.
Also that.
Yeah.
Where the guy specifically has a crush on like a 13 or 14-year-old child and like tries to go out of his way to date her.
That movie's so fucking inappropriate.
But the line in question is room 14, it's got to be seen, was improvised.
Yeah.
It's a very large step away from John Wick. Seeing him in this kind of role. Yeah. And then the thing is like with the premonition too, where she thinks that he's going to put the knife in her mouth.
Yeah, that was another thing is
Super important.
Feel like this premonition was actually given to her by the witches. I think they were warning her in order to get her closer to them.
I agree. I think it could have been definitely something that they had created in the same way that one of them may have possibly turned into a cougar and jumped into her room.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that happened when she stayed at that motel is she comes home late after a shoot, opens her door, and there's something in the darkness. Now she goes to get Mr. Keanu Reeves and his buddy to go check it out, and it's a cougar.
But he thinks something different. He thinks that she may be a sex worker and that the person who was in there with her, she doesn't want him in there anymore, or he's not paying or something. Because when he walks up there, he's like, all right, dude, the show's over. Like, he assumes it's a man. He assumes that she doesn't want him there anymore and then is going to kick him out. And they've done it before because he brought him with him. He brought the other dude and he has a bat. They know exactly what the situation is because that's what he does in his sleazy motel there.
Yeah, and I imagine that was the whole deal with 214 as well, is that he knew that she was a prostitute and she probably got some sort of like...
well, he mentions that it's an underage girl who's like running away.
She ran away from Ohio.
Yeah.
And not typically, but a lot of times in these situations when you have an underage girl who's trying to make her way to a big city, one of the biggest industries there is prostitution.
Yeah, you end up getting into sex work basically.
Yeah.
But there was two things that we mentioned already. The first was the scene where it seems that Keanu Reeves goes into her room and forces a knife into her mouth.
Yeah.
And is like pushing it further into her mouth. And there's been a few interpretations of it. One of the ones I saw that was interesting was that this could have been her personal fear of penetration, of whether or not, like, basically your fear before you have sex, like you don't know what's going to happen. And also the kind of general idea that most sexual encounters are started by men. It's almost never going to be the woman who starts it because men are so forceful about these kind of things. So it could have been that. It could have been something the witches did, where it was dangerous. Either way, it's a warning about, like, you know, certain men may treat women a certain way.
Right. And then after that, you know, after she has the premonition, she wakes up, somebody's trying to get into her room, so she hurries and locks the door, to which then she hears something going down in the room next to her, which would be 214. That sounds like someone's getting murdered. Yeah,
that was the other piece, was that if it's not going to happen to you, it might happen to somebody that's very close to you.
Yeah.
In this case, literally, which is also turns into an amazing cinematography shot of her leaning up against the wall. And she's like, it's just a circle of light as she's like listening to what's happening as it moves out.
Yeah, you just see her silhouette listening.
Which is like just a visualization of how helpless you might be in a situation like that, because she can't leave herself. She's probably going to get in danger. And then the person she runs to then tries to sexually assault her in the following scene, which is when she rejects that girl.
And it could happen. I mean, like, that's the thing I also wanted to mention. Like, the director is also trying to show, like, not only can it happen with men, but also women.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, because in this case...
she was saying no multiple times.
Yeah, and in this case, it ended up being the woman that hurt her the most.
Yeah, yeah, other women. In some way, I feel like they were sort of pitted against each other because of, like, the competition to be, like, the best model, or to be in someone's favor, to be, like, in the photographer's favor, to be in the guy who designs clothes, to be, like... in like the fashion show, like when the main character gets to be the closing model in the fashion show is like something that just doesn't happen. Like that was purely for the movie and to have her, like, her rebirth moment that we had mentioned earlier.
Right. So that brings me to the question, who is the Neon Demon?
It's Jessie, but only after she goes through the transformation.
Yeah, I believe so too.
Well, didn't we kind of discuss that there was a large possibility that she just gets, like, her body gets invaded by the demon?
Right. So there's this interesting take on the movie that I looked at where, you know, you have the Coven of Witches, and not only do they need to consume the flesh, but they need to consume the flesh of a demon. And so in the beginning, when they take her to that party and there's the strobing lights and she starts to walk into the light, that's basically the beginning of the possession. And then she's full on possessed after the runway show. You even see a personality transformation. She dresses different. She stands up for herself more. And at that point, she starts to transition into the more narcissistic side of things, less of the genuine natural beauty, and starting to transition into the industry beauty.
Do you think that the advances from both men and women in this case pushed her more inward into analyzing just herself? So if all of these people are going to treat me like shit, I'm probably just the best thing that there is.
Yes. She
Yeah.
mentions that to the guy that she's, like, dating, not dating. She's like, no, you don't understand. I don't want to be like them. They want to be like me. That's, like, one of the lines she has, because she's had the transformation at that point, where she's like, no, they're actually trying to be like me. I'm the important thing right now.
Yeah, there was that whole diner scene.
And it's because of what you mentioned, because of what had happened to her already. It made her really, really, like, narcissistic about what had been happening up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
The whole diner scene was really uncomfortable.
Oh, where
I
he
love
talks
that
about
scene.
It's so blatant. Like,
Yeah.
it's
So
like
crazy.
I fully believe that people have these dinners, that you go to a dinner with this really pompous asshole who's going to tell you right to your face that you're, like, ugly, and you have to be okay with it.
So I wanted to talk about this diner scene a little bit. Now, the conversation that they're having between the casting director and Jesse's boyfriend person
He's
is
a
really
designer
interesting.
too, right?
Yeah,
He's
he's
like
a
a fashion
designer as
designer.
well. Yeah, he's pretty high up on the food chain in the fashion industry. But I wanted to talk about this conversation because I feel like it really shows the differing perspectives about beauty. Is that I feel like somebody who's around beauty all the time works in this industry has a very unique perception versus somebody who is a consumer of beauty, you know, like the photographer Jesse's boyfriend would be. And in this conversation, they were talking about, you know, I believe the casting director says beauty isn't everything. It's the only thing.
Yeah, and he also mentions that people can tell natural beauty and they can tell when people have had work done on them.
Yeah.
And in his eyes, someone who's had plastic surgery is not a natural beauty and is not as beautiful as, say, somebody who is naturally beautiful.
Yeah, and it shows the perspectives about beauty, because I feel like we've gotten kind of accustomed to fake beauty, and to ask for natural beauty can be really frustrating for people that have spent thousands of dollars to look a certain way because that's what they were told to do, you know, in order to get ahead in their career.
I think what was also like very, I don't know, uncomfortable was hearing like beauty as a currency, because I've never heard that term like that, but it makes sense. It makes sense in the line of work.
Yeah, like I feel like.
But like you were saying, also
Yeah.
around the whole world, like just in general, in life in general.
Yeah,
beauty is a currency.
definitely. And that brings me to think about how I even perceive beauty. Because for a while, I wanted to be one of those people that was like, beauty doesn't really matter. It's not about what you look like. It's what's inside, which is definitely true. You know, what's inside does matter. But everybody subscribes to beauty standards, whether they're conscious of it or not. And to ignore that is kind of like, you're not giving credit where credit is due, you know?
Yeah, he's also getting at the idea of the standard that exists currently, like, say, in the United States, where the current standard is the European beauty standard, which is blonde hair, blue eyes, very thin, light skin.
Eurocentric.
Yeah.
So that's, like, the typical thing you'll find in models, and you see it in all the models in this movie. It's like the top fashion industry models are usually going to have that one same look, and they're not going to be too different from each other.
Right.
I think that's why when, I believe it's Sarah, right, the tall one, when she does not get the job but Jesse gets the runway, and she immediately throws a trash can at the fucking at the mirror, and
Yeah.
Jesse cuts her hand. She immediately starts sucking on the blood because she just got rejected and she wants the beauty that Jesse has,
Yeah.
and then so she's like consuming herself so she could get that beauty.
And
Also,
so-
your first sign.
Yeah, that scene is sort of like foreshadowing what their intentions are of this girl, because essentially this girl is a part of their beauty ritual, in that they need to consume the blood and flesh of a virgin in order to maintain their beauty that they have. And, you know, I feel like why they had to wait is because they're waiting for the demon to fully manifest. But at that point, Sarah she was ready to have the blood now. She was feeling defeated, and she was like, no, I want this beauty in me now. I want to be recognized again.
So then, what do we think of the ending?
Ah, yes.
What are your final thoughts on it? Do you think it ended well? Was it weird? Did you not understand it?
I liked it a lot. It's a little confusing for some people, I know.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the ending scene. So the very, very, very ending, when they're going to the last photo shoot, the two models, essentially Jessie is murdered at the house where she's being kept by Ruby. And after that point, it is obvious that they have killed her. They're covered in blood. They have that sexy bloody shower scene, you know.
Yeah, depending on your kinks and interests, this might be the moment where you're like, I'm really enjoying this, or you're like, this is really fucking uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, but let's be honest. What's
The bath.
hotter than a bunch of women covered in blood?
The bath, though.
Bathing together.
Just
Yeah.
bathing in blood together. Come on now, guys.
So
Like,
after that, you see
So
Gigi
fucking
and
metal.
Sarah going to a photo shoot with the creepy photographer guy from the earlier scene, the gold scene. And, you know, there's this younger model there who's basically talking shit about other models as she's getting her hair and makeup done, and saying how she had that line that we had mentioned earlier
Yeah.
about basically no one cares about you after 21.
Yep.
So how do you keep up with beauty standards? Has anyone ever like beaten you? Like has a girl ever beaten you out of a job? What'd you do about it? I ate her.
That was so great.
Quite
Yeah.
literally.
What a great delivery for that line, because it's like, we know she ate someone.
Yeah.
But they think it's just a joke. Like, yeah, you know, I eat my competition.
And essentially, Sarah, the one who delivered that line, ends up in the photo shoot because the other girl gets kicked out, which probably means the spell was working, you know?
Yeah, she manifests that, like, the new job that she gets for that.
Mm-hmm. And then there's Gigi. Gigi can't handle it. Gigi can't handle the guilt.
She can't hang.
She can't hang. She's obviously new to this coven, and she starts feeling serious guilt and remorse to the point where she then stabs herself in the stomach to try and get the body of Jessie out of her.
Guts herself.
Yeah. After puking up an eyeball, which is fantastic.
Oh, I wanted the
Yeah.
eyeball to move so bad.
Same.
Yeah, I was just hoping it would just move and, like, look at her, like, one final time. It would have been great, but they did not go that route. What they did instead was have the other girl come in and eat the eyeball, and she was salivating at that point when the eyeball was on the floor. Like, it like drips from her mouth.
And she was totally unbothered by the fact that her friend just gutted herself.
Goes back and does the shoot.
Yeah, she just, okay, gotta finish this eyeball off, go back to business.
Yeah, it was good. I like the ending.
Yeah, it really...
It'll confuse regular people, I believe.
Well, it's like, it gets really surreal at that moment where they've eaten someone. Nobody said anything. Nobody knows anything about this girl. They're continuing their job like nothing had happened. And so this is like such a strong point of like what happens to people constantly.
It was also a perfect setup considering she was new in town. And like you said, she didn't really know anybody. So there wouldn't really be family to look for her because, as you know, in the beginning, she mentioned that her family was dead. Which also might have been a selling point for the witches. Like, here's this hot, young, beautiful
they wanted
girl.
To bring her in.
Yeah, no one knows who she is. She has no family. No one's going to notice if she goes missing.
I'm glad you bring up the fact that Gigi is new because what's the red hair girl's name?
Ruby.
Ruby is not.
Ruby.
She even has that.
She's like the leader.
Well, she has that moment where she menstruates at the full moon. So what I like a lot of people believe is that after she consumes the blood of Jesse, she's menstruating all the old blood out, and that she might have been doing this for a couple years, whether it be hundreds or thousands.
Yeah, there's the potential there that she's a very old witch and that she was, in fact, bathing in the moonlight at that point, so she could physically look younger, in addition to being, like, bathing in the blood itself. So a lot of interesting things, but they're not said blatantly. But either way, there's really good ending to the film, and I think this is a really good point to go on to the new movie or the other movie that we talked about.
You actually had something to say.
Yeah.
Yes, as we transition from the Neon Demon into the Love Witch. Love Witch is a fantastic movie, but something that I wanted to bring up was the importance of the critics for both of these movies. Both of them bring up the director Russ Myers. So do you guys know Russ Myers?
Yes.
So he is an exploitation director. More like sexploitation director. And if you don't know what he's made, I'll just bring up the three that he's most known for. One of them being Super Vixens, Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, and the one that is mentioned the most is Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. These movies contain women that kill men specifically, but they're also very much, for the majority of the runtime, are nude.
Yeah.
And the thing is, both directors had a relation to this in different ways. So with the director of Drive and the Neon Demon, he embraced that, and he said that was actually inspiration for Jessie, that she was going to be a very small person, but then after she gets her power, she becomes more and more vicious. She becomes more visceral, just like in the Valley of the Dolls. While Anna Biller for the Love Witch says the exact opposite.
She hates that dude.
The guy that that said that, like, because there were many things that said that the Love Witch was a sexploitation movie, and it's obvious that Anna Biller was a Russ Myers fucking fan. And she's like, I don't treat my fucking actresses like this. I don't like this style of editing. I feel offended that you would even compare that shit.
Yeah, she was straight up offended. She was like, what? No. She's like, that is not what I made.
And it's very interesting because I saw a weird take on it. They're like basically saying that Russ Myers is like a symbol for like feminism and femininity, is saying the same thing like Arby's is a fucking icon for fucking cows.
Shit.
Yep.
And then this is what I wanted to bring up, though, because we have not discussed this on the podcast about women in movies. So I wrote this down. So a lot of people like to praise the Valley of the Dolls and all this stuff because the women in those movies take on male traits. They become very powerful. They kill. They use sex to get what they want. But here's what a lot of people like to talk about with those things. The thing is, when we have stuff like Ripley and Aliens, or like people like women going through these very masculine roles, it's like it's a trope that females act like men. So then it just reinforces the masculine traits within women, and so it basically takes away from the femininity of feminine roles within movies.
It says that the only gender role that's going to be the most dominant and most powerful is the masculine, and it has to be both women and men getting into that, as opposed to having a balance of the two.
And that's the thing, like when we just look at like badass women, we're giving them masculine traits,
right?
And that's why I really like the Love Witch, because she embraces her femininity in the movie so much, as well as she even says it to like her friend, like, I believe we should do everything for men. Like, we should give them sex, we should give them food, we should do that and embrace our feminine side, because that's also a beautiful thing and it's very powerful.
She also ends those statements with a but statement.
Yeah.
Because there are.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because like her friend, she is against the patriarchy. She's like, it's so like patriarchal. How could you do that? But she's like, but what we want is love. And that's what will get us our ultimate end goal.
Right, so I think this is a good time to start talking about the Love Witch officially.
Sorry, I just thought that it was a very interesting thing.
I was going to bring that up, but honestly, you beat me to it.
Sorry,
Thank you.
one director loved the critics, the other one
Yeah.
absolutely fucking hated it.
It's really interesting because I feel like the roles represented of women are kind of similar in these movies, so are the
Yeah.
situations, but the takes on them have been totally different as far as how the audience responded, how critics responded.
They've used their situations to gain control and power over their lives, but in much different ways.
Right. So let's talk about The Love Witch. I'm really excited for this one. I actually found this movie by accident by scrolling through Tumblr many years ago. For obvious reasons, it's very aesthetic. But
Yeah.
this is a 2016 American horror tragedy comedy that was... Oh, okay. It was written, directed, produced, edited, scored, costume designed, and set design all by Anna Biller.
Let's give a round of applause for her.
Right?
That's a
That's a lot of
handful.
work.
This
That is her movie.
Yes. And I feel like it couldn't have been done any other way with how stylistic it was.
It's so uniquely, originally hers. I don't think I've seen anything else that's quite like it.
So Anna Biller is an independent American filmmaker. She's a graduate of UCLA and Cal Institute of the Arts.
Not surprised.
This is her second film she's done, and she likes to explore feminist themes throughout both of her movies that she's done.
She gets a lot of influence from like early 1920s and 30s films.
Yeah, some movies specifically that were cited that were inspirations of her were the movie Gertrude, Leave Her to Heaven, Black Narcissus, The Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant, Peau d'Ane, and Jean Dielman.
All pre-40s,
23.
black and white movies mostly.
Yeah, and they all star women.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's
sorry.
all starring women.
Yeah.
Women's stories centered around women.
Well, this was when like female directors were having a heyday in film, and there was no industry standards for the ratings on movies, so they can do whatever the fuck they wanted, and there was no big businesses to like tell them they had to take it a certain way.
Right. So this film received a limited release in the United States. I believe it was only really shown in like small
Yeah.
theaters. It wasn't really like a big theater thing. There wasn't actually a budget listed for this movie, but the box office revenue was only about like $250,000 is what this
Very
movie
low.
made. Yeah, it
I
didn't make
mean-
a whole lot of money.
I would assume that she made it on a pretty small budget.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it had too many complex things in it.
What's interesting is this film was actually shot on a 35 millimeter film and was cut from the negatives. So she did this OG style, and it really shows in the aesthetic of the movie. It's all encompassing in everything, really.
It's in Technicolor, right?
Uh,
I believe so.
It's possible.
It
I
looks
didn't
like
look
it,
at
yeah.
it.
It definitely looks like it's made in Technicolor. What's really interesting about this movie is it plays on aesthetics. Now, everything is very retro. The way that they talk and act, the makeup, the outfits, the scenes that they're in. However, this is set at the present time. There are some little breaks in that retro world that you're put in. For instance, there's modern cars that you'll see driven around. Now, the Love Witch, that's Elaine Parks. She drives around like an old muscle car, but everybody else is driving like, modern Hyundais and Toyotas and stuff like that. And there's also cell phones, which is really off-putting, but those are the only really pieces of modern day that you see in these movies, or in this movie.
This this break in setting and time period is accentuated usually when she's outside. It's something that I've noticed when she's walking around a park or something like that. You can easily tell she's in the modern world. And then once she goes to like any of her, like when she goes to the burlesque club, when she goes back to her house, everything kind of entirely changes like the mood and everything about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I really like in the beginning her voiceover of like how she's explaining things.
Right.
And you keep coming back to this voiceover of her telling you like her internal feelings. And like some of the funniest bits of the movie to me are when she's like, look at this guy. He's such a fucking pussy. Like, why is he acting this way?
Yeah.
And like, this is like a constant theme running through it is that she wants certain things from these men and she's very explicit about it, but she also wants them to be able to handle like their emotions, to be able to like tell her like how they're feeling, what's going on, and every time it's too much for them.
Right. So that brings me to, what are your guys' initial thoughts about this movie?
It's a lot to consume.
Oh yeah.
Because the thing is, like, when you watch this movie, not only do you think of certain time periods and certain genres, like you could say, oh, satanic cult movie from the 70s. You could say, oh, a very nice love fairy tale from like stylized after the 1930s. There's a lot of stuff that you could like interpret, especially with the time period and like the aesthetics that we're choosing. I noticed that there were a lot of film inconsistencies, but I also thought that the voiceover was not well done. I thought it needed more grit and grain over it. But other than that, I thought the movie was fantastic. It has a lot of original ideas, and it's a very awesome depiction of modern witchcraft and like Wicca inside a movie, and I've never seen one like this.
That was something I wanted to bring up as a practicing witch. I really appreciate how much Anna Biller did her research before making this movie, because very often the depictions of witchcraft and Wicca is very like Hollywood stylized, but a lot of what she mentioned is very traditional. Some things not so traditional. Some things were added definitely for shock value. But as far as like the ceremonies that they had, those are very like depictive actual ceremonies that would happen, minus the rape, of course. But that was a small section of that.
I mean, there's so many little notes that if you are a practicing like witch, or if you have like any idea with it, you see the 3-card future, past, present tarot card layouts. You have certain herbs that you may recognize if you were practicing that.
They mentioned the Sabbats and the celebrations, things like Samhain, Mabon, Ostara, which was also something I wanted to mention. But I'll get to that actually.
Same with like the throwing of the salt over the shoulder and stuff.
Yeah.
But there was something I wanted to mention. Like, it's not intended. It like the dialogue is very dry in a way that's like, I don't know if it was intentional. Not when I mean dry, I mean like some people will say lines and they'll wait a while before they reply to it, and I think it was an intended kind of thing, kind of like the Eraserhead kind of effect.
It's very indicative of older films. Like
right.
if you go watch anything from like 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you'll have dialogue very similar to what you saw in this, trying to emulate human conversation.
And I really enjoyed this film. I really liked it a lot, but also, a part of me put down the little silhouette of like Mystery Science Theater 3000 on the bottom of the screen. Because like it's very cheesy, it's very beautiful, and it's very fun. Like It's just, I felt like this is the equivalent of getting a Lunchable in your fucking lunch when you're a kid.
So like, how did the style and design influence the way that you viewed this movie? Do you think it could have been done another way and still been the same?
No. I mean, it set the expectation for what you were looking at and what you were going to be experiencing in the film. Like, just from looking at the poster, just from looking at trailers, you know that the movie is going to be fun, that it's not meant to be taken super seriously, and that it's going to be something that isn't just a flipping of roles. Like what you had mentioned at the beginning, where there's roles that women take on where it's just a role reversal, where they do all the things that the men do. That's not what this movie was. Not only was the roles switched, she was embracing that role while being feminine. And so this was something that was uniquely original and pushed the film forward.
It was like the dueling ideas of femininity.
Yeah.
Like battling against each other. And this is like most well showcased when it's
the tea party.
God, her landlady whose husband she sleeps with, and then
Trish.
you have Trish. Yeah,
Trish, the very posh.
Yes. Well, when they both like sit down, that's like the exact they're both have like aspects of femininity within both of themselves and how they live their lives.
Right.
However, it's like a very like a different, like a slightly warped perception of both of them.
Right. Yeah. Neither one is like on either end of the spectrum. They're somewhere along this sliding scale of like, how do you want to respond and act around men? And she mentions to her, like, I want to have sex. I want to have love. Don't you want to be loved? Like, you're supposed to be giving these kind of things.
And that's something that's constantly brought up throughout this movie, is the differences of what is feminism and what does it mean to be a respectable woman. Now, we've come to this time where feminism is definitely more in the conversation, and there seems to be a certain ideal that most people subscribe to, that like who mentioned it earlier about women taking on masculine roles?
I did.
Yeah, and I feel like that's sort of where this modern idea of feminism has been pushed, is that in order for a woman to be respected, she also has to take on roles of masculinity.
Right. She has to take on masculine roles, but she also has to like take care of the idea of how people see her sexually. That's also like one of the biggest things too.
Trish also brings this up at their tea party because they
yes.
explain, she's like, oh, well, like the thing is, like, if we keep holding on to these old values of femininity, how will we ever expect to be equals among our male counterparts?
Right, and this is where Elaine comes in, and her differing view of femininity is that she fully embraces what is considered to be the feminine, what it means to be soft and caring and nurturing, which is essentially what the feminine ideal is.
But also having her boundaries.
Right, and also having boundaries.
And, like,
she
her
knows what she
needs,
wants.
her wants. Yeah, exactly. Her needs and wants need to be met, and that's what she's asking of them.
And I think that's really where feminism should be, is what do you want? And a lot of times people are told what they want and they just believe it, but she knows what she wants and she knows what she doesn't want. And what she wants is different from what maybe some other people want. Her idea of being respected is also being loved.
Right.
It's like that old conversation, like, oh, they will never respect feminism if you're just going to be naked. Like, that's something. It's like,
yeah.
and
Right.
it's that dichotomy of like, some people feel more empowered with their body being naked, and some people feel more empowered with their body being covered. It just depends on the person.
Right, and that was something interesting that I really appreciated about this movie, is when they were in their ceremonies with the Wiccan Coven, is they were in traditional dress. They were sky-clad, which back in the day, not many people are able to do this anymore, and not many people are comfortable with being sky-clad, but sky-clad essentially means that you're naked, except for possibly being covered by a certain robe that you would use for the ceremonies. And it's very empowering, one, to be naked. A lot of times in these rituals, the reason that they are naked is to remove any sort of external factors that might affect their energy and the flow of their energy.
You can specifically blame 50s morals.
Right.
For turning the idea of nakedness into something that was highly sexualized.
It goes back to like Puritan, man. This goes like way
Yeah.
farther back.
And before that, it was that.
Even before that, it
Yeah.
was like it was heavily that. Yeah.
I mean, in the sense of like what we look at now in modern media, it can be traced back to the idea that during the 50s and the 60s, this is when gender roles were set like in fucking stone, and they wanted women and men to act a certain way. And then this is when you had like 10 years later, like a decade, you had the first wave of feminism, and then another 20 years the second, and then I think now it's like the third or fourth wave feminism that they're trying to like break through, which is the split of, are you going to be a respectable woman and have sex as much as you want, or are you not going to have sex and be that respectable feminist woman that you want to be? And that's like the biggest battle between the break of what is modern feminism, because at least amongst women, and then the idea of men being brought into the conversation is also another thing that some people won't or will accept.
Right. Going back to what Justine was saying about her, like our main character knowing what she wants,
right,
and then this being a representation of feminism in a way. She sort of lives in like her own dream, in a way, because she's seeking out these men that don't exist. She's seeking out this Prince Charming, which ends up being like the like the detective later, police officer, detective, whatever.
Griff.
But yeah, Griff. There you go. Ends up being Griff becomes like the prince. Like she sees almost everything that she wants, except this dude's about to take her to jail, sort of thing, for murder, etc. But I mean, but the thing is, like, she's. I lost my point for just a moment, but I mean, she's fabricated her ideal, and like, because every time that she has like a man who she thinks is like the correct, they do something that they get too emotional,
right?
And that's like a big problem now. And then she's seeking out things that just people are not like that.
Well, they can't like sort through it. It's not that they get too emotional.
And it was interesting too, is like, I feel like her ideal man was sort of the embodiment of the masculine. When you think of masculinity, you would think of all the traits that she had listed, you know, someone who just kind of does what he needs to do. He's very assertive and strong, but he's also like, he loves her and he gives her that love, you know. But in a sense, I feel like this idea of this like hyper masculinity that's been pushed in society has made men emotionally unavailable, because when you really start to push a lot of these masculine ideals, they pull you away from the emotional, which is a lot of what the feminine is embodied in, is emotion. And when you have someone who's so masculine, he becomes emotionally unavailable. And that was the problem, is even though she found this ideal man, he couldn't love her because he couldn't feel love like the way she did.
He couldn't reciprocate the emotions that she was giving to him in the first place. And that's the idea that she was getting at, was a more positive idea of what she was expecting masculinity to look like for men. And that was the idea that they can fill this role of what they were expecting while also returning any sort of affection they were receiving.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the spells that are used in The Craft. Like when they use it on the one guy and then he becomes like obsessive.
Yeah.
Like that's what ends up happening with like a lot of the dudes that she does this to, is they become obsessive. They become very like not the ideal man in her mind anyway. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of, I don't know, it's interesting. It's kind of like saying like chasing that is not even important because you're not going to ever find that perfect like balance that you want. Everyone is like a little chaotic mess. You know, sort of thing.
She also mentions like it's about loving people, like even with all their little quirks and little fucking things that they have with them. Like every time they smile, every time they get sad, it's about love. I mean, love is like you care about those little things, and those little things matter.
Right. Well, she mentioned those are the things that you end up caring about the most because you end up noticing these things.
That also brings me to the thought of unconditional love. I feel like unconditional love is something that's pushed a lot in media and religion. Loving somebody no matter what, no matter how horrible of a person they are. But to be honest, I feel like unconditional love is incredibly toxic. Because in a way, you're sacrificing your own wants and desires in order to conform to this person's mess of a life that they have.
This probably happens the most with family and with people that you feel like are supposed to be like very close friends, where you're feeling like you have to help them no matter what. And people shy away from the idea that you can just stop talking to someone if it's going to improve your health.
Yeah, fuck marriage. Basically. I mean, I get that. Like, that's the thing, like, overextending yourself for someone who probably wouldn't do the same for you.
Yeah.
When you could completely just cut them out of your life.
But I think what the film was trying to get at was that she was trying to represent a more positive version of what femininity and masculinity can look like together. And it's what she was sort of looking for. It just takes an alternate route when she starts murdering people.
Well, okay. She didn't kill
nobody.
anybody intentionally until the very end.
Yeah.
All the other things were accidental because the men just fell victim to their own emotions. She even mentioned it. It became too much for them to handle.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. I think the transition for her character happens at the very end.
Yeah.
When she does decide to stab this guy because she's going to go to jail.
And because he wouldn't love her.
Hey,
For once, someone actually rejected her.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't figure it out. Did he just like not get affected as much, or did he like break from what was happening?
His will was just too
Gosh.
strong.
Right? Was he
He's
too macho? Or what?
I honestly thought it was going to go a different route. I thought when he rejected the love potion from her, I thought he was basically saying like, you know what? I don't need a potion to show you that I love you.
Gotcha.
I'll just love you. But it didn't go that route. She fucking murders him.
Yeah.
Did you guys think that at all? I don't know. I thought like, in a way, he was like, I'm not going to take your potion. I'll just fucking enjoy you as you are. No,
he just seemed like the kind of guy who was just going to be like his one main goal was, of course, bringing that sense of justice because, like, really, like, isn't that what most cops are? They feel like they have this huge sense of entitlement for something. And in this case, because of his role, he was like, no, I have to bring her in because she may have possibly killed someone.
She did kill someone. Basically, her DNA was everywhere. All over the crime scene.
Well, see, that's
one.
the thing, is that he technically died of heart failure.
Yeah, and I feel like if she had actually thought she did something wrong, she wouldn't have left her DNA
Yeah,
everywhere.
she wouldn't have like just left the apartment as it was. She was like, he just died of a heart attack. Like,
I mean, she did like, drug him.
Yeah,
She gave him like LSD,
Yeah,
like
just a little
toxic LSD.
hallucinogenic
They did mention it was
devil's
toxic,
weed.
Yeah, toxic devil's weed.
Okay,
Oh my
okay.
God.
So maybe
Maybe,
she kind of
yeah, she kind of. Let's not try to think that she's a good person here.
Well,
Like,
she's
this-
definitely not.
a good person.
But I don't think she's a completely evil person
Not
either.
good.
I think she wasn't conscious of the actions. I feel like she was so oblivious in her pursuit of love that she didn't recognize the consequences that
Right.
come with pursuing such a thing.
So immersed in like her own like little fairy tale
Yeah, exactly.
of pursuit that she doesn't even know that she's like potentially killing people or harming people in the process of seeking this.
So go ahead.
I thought the difference with Richard was very, very interesting.
Oh, he was so lame.
Ah,
He was just so lame as
what
a
a
person.
square.
Like, not only is he like completely uninterested in his wife, he cheats on her, and then he's just like, "Leave me alone." Like, what the fuck do you want?
No,
like,
no, it's not. It's not even that. It's like my wife. When I tell her like I want to be an astronaut or I want to like act like a fucking
yeah, that
cowboy,
was the other end of it.
it was just like a guy that was heavily inspired from the 1950s serials. It's just like she just thinks it's stupid. And like I've never done anything crazy. I've never had an affair. He's like, well,
And
you
then
want an affair?
Has this new girl do love magic or sex magic?
She uses sex magic to create love magic.
There you go.
And I love his death because before he commits the biggest suicide, like a pussy, the Pisces he is.
Ah,
I love the Pisces call.
That was a hilarious line.
he's a Pisces.
He has the tarot cards out, the past, present, and future. So with the past one, it was the 9 of Swords, and it's basically just like grief and feeling guilty. So he's feeling guilty that he like fucking had an affair. And then it has the 3 of Swords, which symbolizes like heartbreak, basically being away from someone for a long time, the feeling of loneliness. And then finally, for the future, we have death.
Dun dun dun.
Death.
Which death in tarot is not always a negative thing, but in this case, its placement did
Yeah,
serve it as being a
as
negative.
a visual marker for the
Yeah.
film.
Foreshadowing. Yeah, I really loved all of the symbolism and the tarot cards, how those served as foreshadowing. If you're familiar with tarot, they're definitely spot on of what goes on in the plot. I wanted to ask, how do you guys feel about witchcraft? Is this something that frightens you? Does it intrigue you? What are your opinions about it?
It's cool.
It's cool.
I think the modern witch is a thing that's coming more and more prevalent within women these days as well as men. I think both people are both sides of the coin are embracing it, as well as more with astrology in that point.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of hard to not talk about astrology these days with a lot of modern people, especially millennials and Gen Z.
I feel like the rise of witchcraft is directly relational to the rise of feminism that's been going on in our culture, at least the past couple years, because witchcraft not only places women in a position of power, it also promotes equality between men and women. In covens, there's 2 leaders, a male and a female leader. There's always the presence of duality between the feminine and the masculine. And that was really interesting to see represented because, in a way, even though Elaine is in this very feminine role, she also takes on some more masculine characteristics as far as, like, her pursuit of men. Like, where she seduced the professor, one of the first men she seduced in this movie. It was very reminiscent of something that might happen on, like, a college campus, but in reverse with a dude.
Yeah,
You
pretty
know,
much.
the dude checks out this other girl and is like, oh, hey, want to go somewhere? And then proceeds to get her drunk and, you know, do the thing, have his way. But in a way, she was in this role herself.
Yeah, she did it.
She seduced this man. She got him to take her somewhere. She drugged him and had her way with him.
Pretty much.
I mean, as far as witchcraft goes, I don't think it's ever made me scared. Not as scared as something like really like zealous Abrahamic religion people do.
Oh,
Yeah.
Def.
I'm gonna put them all in there.
Yeah.
All of you.
Shove
I'm looking
them
at the
all in that
microphone.
bin.
All of you suck. By the way, all of you. If you are Abrahamic religion, you suck. All right. Anyway, so beside the point. Anyway, but like Wiccan and stuff, I feel like it calls to something older than everything that at least like what like the general consensus of what is like a normal religion to follow.
Right.
It stands in contrast to that as sort of its own counterculture, as its own way of worshiping, as its own way to find like your own sense of enlightenment.
Yeah.
Which is what religion offers people for the most part and whatnot. But Wiccans, I've just been like, good. Go do that. If that makes you happy, go do that. It looks way cooler than what everyone else is doing. So
yeah, it's really interesting when you start to get into more of like pagan and Wiccan culture.
Right.
Is that so much of the Abrahamic religions base their way that they do things off of these cultures? For instance, all of the holidays are directly related to pagan holidays.
Right.
For example, you have Samhain, which is actually how we would
Halloween.
we would call it Halloween. We have Christmas, which is directly related to Yule. We have Easter, which is
Yule
usually
time.
related to Ostara, which is known as the time of fertility, which is essentially what Easter
Is it?
is.
Yeah,
it's
Easter.
rebirth.
Yeah,
You know. in essence. And I really like how they called to this older part of the religion,
Right.
and how this was sort of the basis for everything, but it has been forgotten and misconstrued through time.
Well, it has a lot of elements that to me make sense to exist together. So like one of the things is like how you might feel mentally about yourself and how you're going to feel towards other people. One of the biggest things is like what is sort of like your intention with things, and what sort of intention you're going to bring to the things that you're creating.
Yeah,
and that's like one of the biggest pieces that she does specifically in the film, but
and that's
also
a
how
big
you can
part
experience it.
of spellcraft.
Yeah,
Is your
exactly.
intention. Essentially, the intention behind the spell is the spell itself.
Yeah.
What you do for the spell doesn't really matter. What matters is
Right.
the energy that you're putting forth into it.
Yeah.
And in this case, even though where she was coming from was sort of a place of goodness, it was also misconstrued by the horrible things that had happened to her in her past, her relationships with men, how she's been
Right.
sort of put into a box, or forced into a box, and that in a sense played on her intentions. Even though she was trying to find love, it was a desperate attempt, and that translated into her magic. The desperation translated into disaster.
I'm glad that you bring up that it's like a very old thing that people have forgotten, because she even mentions it in the film, like, oh, detective, like, this is something that is older than all of your Abrahamic religions. This is
Yeah.
my religion, and it's something that I feel power from.
Yeah.
They also explain, I don't know if they explain it slightly, but they also explain, like, I think it's in the detective like actual like station, there's like white magic and there's black magic. What you're intending to
that
put your
guy was
energy.
such a fucking hack.
Yeah.
The professor who was supposed to be like his expert on
Oh, yeah.
witchcraft, that dude didn't know anything. Like he was like assuming like pretty much the most terrible things that could possibly happen with those, which doesn't really make any sense, because what she was doing seemed to me that it was like sort of the herbalism that might show up in certain things, which makes sense because it's old school medicine basically.
Yeah.
Like you could figure out what plants would help in certain situations, and then since people couldn't explain the science of it, they're like, oh, it's magic or it's
Right.
witchcraft or whatever.
Like, in a sense, she was doing these spells, but the things that she was giving to these men were things that were just grown from the earth. She was
Yeah.
giving them plants. That was the real magic there.
Yeah.
Was the hallucinogenic herbs that she gave them.
And that's always been the relationship with people who are putting together certain potions and brews and things like that. Is they're like, they don't know what's in it. They can't explain how it works, but it does. So obviously it has to be witchcraft. And then you had, like Mitch mentioned earlier, the Abrahamic religions that were like, this is heresy. This is like not something that God wills. So we're going to hang everybody who's possibly a witch.
What's fucking crazy is those Abrahamic religions, like that's witchcraft, man. The stuff that they practice is similar to witchcraft in a way that's like, okay, you're putting your energy towards prayer. You're praying that this good thing will happen to you or the people around you.
Yeah.
It's all bad. That's it.
And even I've been doing a lot more research about traditional pagan ceremonies, and thinking back on my time when I was forced to go to church by my family, so much of the ceremony is directly related to how pagan ceremonies go. Even like, I don't know if anyone did this at their church, but after we'd have our ceremony, we'd have like coffee hour where we'd have
Right.
coffee and like little cakes and stuff. But in pagan tradition, after you have like some sort of ceremony, you would have tea and cakes after, or wine and cakes, where you would
Party.
serve wine, little cakes and food. It's a way to celebrate the energy that you've put forth and honor the gods in this good time that they've given you.
You tell me that you're like, here's what I gotta say though. Go to church, take communion. Tell me that doesn't feel like a fucking ritual.
Yeah.
For real.
You're eating the body of Christ, but whatever.
You drink the blood and
Also
eat the body.
drinking
Is
some
this
blood.
neon demon?
I think the priests are just trying to get drunk.
Right.
Then why they give me fucking apple juice, dude?
That wasn't
Or
even
fucking
wine.
grape
That
juice.
was just Welch's. You
Yeah,
know, like,
fuck.
I was like, what are you doing here?
Oh,
Dude.
my church gave us real
Oh my
wine.
God. Yeah, for real.
Wine, okay.
But I know what you're talking about. When I was in middle school and they would like hand out like legit bread and like Welch's grapefruit juice, I'd be like dipping it in there like, this is pretty fucking good. I'm like, can I have more? And they were like, what? No, this is supposed to be like a solemn moment. And I was like, I guess, but like I'm hungry.
Yeah, like, well, this bread is so good.
Like you just
oh
gave
my
me a
God.
fucking loaf of bread. Like, can you hook it up with some more juice or what?
Where's that sourdough at, bro?
My throat is dry. I cannot sing the hymns.
Yeah, exactly.
if I do not wet my whistle.
And that's another thing, is singing hymns. Singing hymns was considered to be a spell, you know?
Yeah.
Because you're calling forth this energy and you're using these words that invoke a certain thought. And your intention behind the song is very specific. And this is
Right.
also something that happened in pagan ceremonies. We would read stories from the book, and then we would sing songs to honor what we just read about.
Yeah, it's also no mystery that most of the Abrahamic religions were used to expand certain empires' control over certain lands, and they hid it behind the idea that it was just a religious spread, and then you had the Crusades. So it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, and even then, like, oh dang, the Crusades are even more complicated because the Crusades is not like one thing.
Exactly.
It's like 9 of them.
Yeah.
And it's also a back and forth too, because then you've got like Christians coming in and fucking shit up, and then you've got Muslims going back, and it's just a back and forth between.
Then you got the Roman
them.
Empire changing parts of the Bible so they could touch little boys.
Yeah. Oh, shit. But that also brings me to the differing perspectives of religion. You have something like Wiccan paganism that is very much embodied in acknowledging both the masculine and feminine perspectives and way of doing things, versus I feel like Abrahamic religions, they only have one God, and their God is a man, and so much of their ideals are very embodied in the masculine.
I mean, the origin story sets women up for failure.
Yeah. And then you have the way that they handled spreading their religion is where it was forced upon people, which in a lot of ways is considered to be a masculine way of doing things by forcing something.
Well, it was the whole thing that happened in the United States with Manifest Destiny, where they're like, I'm entitled to this land because God told me.
Right. Versus...
And he's cooler than your God.
Yeah. Versus when you have something like paganism and Wiccanism, where you have the acknowledgement of both sides of the perspective, and you're not really forced to do anything. Everything that you do is willing. There's something that they always say in these ceremonies is perfect love and perfect trust, and that's something that has to be done willingly. It can't be perfect if it's forced upon you. You can't force love, and you can't force trust.
A big thing that I see with a lot of because everybody who identifies themselves as pagan or believing in that is already subscribing to a really broad description of what that is.
Yes, there's so many different subgenres, you could say, of paganism and Wiccanism.
Yeah, exactly. And even then, like, every individual is going to worship it differently. There is no concrete, this is how to be a pagan. You're not gonna. Whereas you could do that for literally every other religion. You could be like, how do I want to be Christian? How do I want to be Muslim? How do I want to be blind? You can. Exactly.
And that was something also that's really interesting about witchcraft. Is not many people know this, but witchcraft is not directly related to any religion. It's commonly used in Wiccanism and paganism. However, witchcraft is a skill that is practiced, and it can also be tied into a religion. So while you can have pagan witches, you can also have Christian witches, you can have Buddhist witches, you can have all sorts of witches, you can have atheist witches for even that, you know.
You could see it in a lot of older cultural ceremonies that are spread out through different religions.
Yeah.
And people might not see it necessarily as a ritual or some sort of magic, but it is tied in directly to the intention of what you were trying to get out of a certain ritual or like festival, you could even say.
Exactly.
In some cases.
And that's kind of the premise of what witchcraft is harnessing and directing your intention into something.
I gotta say, the ceremonies in this movie, they look absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
They put a lot of thought into detail. You get to see little wieners. It's pretty cool.
The dudes who are just chilling.
Tons of flopping dicks.
Yeah, and there's a lot of accuracy too with even her initiation ceremony, where they tied a blindfold around her, tied her hands behind her back, and held a sword to her. This is actually something that does happen in traditional ceremonies, because you're blinded and you're bound, but still you're completely trusting the group of people that you're with, and there's something very special and unique about that.
What did you say? It was true trust and true love. What is it?
Perfect trust. Perfect love.
Perfect love. Beautiful.
Perfect love.
And they stabbed the cup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, the ceremonies in this are wonderful, and like the set design for all the parties afterwards, with like whether it be with the tea or the summer solstice fucking.
Oh yeah, that like little medieval fair thing they had.
I thought it was awesome.
Was such cheese, but I loved it so much.
Same.
I really liked the super psychedelic sex scenes that are female led. She is the one who's controlling all of the action and is not just like laying there and taking it.
Whoa, bro, those fucking colors. He even
Give
said that.
me the rainbow.
Yo,
takes off her jacket. It's so bright.
And there's a rainbow on the inside of her dress. I love the rainbow lining she has on everything. It's really cool because she just wears like all black, but there's a rainbow on the inside.
Did you guys notice how high the mandolin player was?
Oh yeah.
Oh my god, he was like fucking riffing it.
Yeah.
Wasn't someone playing like a recorder at some point?
Also the Lucky Charms line. That was a Mystery Science Theater fucking part.
I mean, all of these things kind of like play into this sort of like going back to like the idea of that she has like this sort of fantasy that she's playing.
She has a
through.
fairy tale fantasy,
and it all flows into that. Like, why does she go to the tea place and there's a random harp lady with like a crown of flowers that like no modern place has that. There's no way. It's like in her mind, like that's like what would be the best like thing to happen
This
there,
really makes me
or
think
ideal.
about whether or not she was then a very unreliable narrator, that the possibility of her being in these public places, they didn't actually look like that.
It's just what was going on in
what
her
she
head.
was perceiving, and then everyone else around her was just normal, and she was like in this weird costume and like acting a certain way, and everybody else is like, what are you doing?
Rolling around like Elvira's like evil twin sister.
Yeah.
And there's something that's just so like off-putting and kind of campy about this world that she's in, and you really question like, is this reality? Like what am I perceiving right now? Which I feel like is sort of the whole point behind everything. She's manifesting her own intention and her own reality into reality, but it has consequences.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's that neon demon moment too where Trish takes on her look.
Oh yeah,
that shit was creepy as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was very weird.
Proceeds to beat the shit out of her.
Yeah. Honestly though, but like when thrown into conflict, this is the problem with a lot of modern witches. They fucking fold. A lot of them can and will. And that's the thing. Like when she gets confronted by Trish, I mean, you could see like the terror on her face. When she's get confronted with a detective, you could see her folding. I mean, even when the girl like grabs, like she's like, I'm gonna go fucking tell the cops you killed my fucking husband. She's like grabbing her pendant and saying crash, crash, crash. That's the thing. Like with a lot of modern things, they believe that a lot of problems can be solved with that. But also the thing is, there's that sense of reality that also hits. So when things don't go their way, as in the love potions, love, finding the one true thing, it's very hard for them to come to these things because they put so much energy towards it. So when it doesn't go that way, that's when the witch crumbles, I believe, at some point in modern witch or paganism.
Like, I think what had happened, especially when she was trying to get the girl to crash and it didn't happen, I think that honestly she never had evil intentions to begin with. I think she was always completely naive and innocent in what she was believing, except at the end when she actually did stab somebody. But that brings me back to the matter of intention, is if your intention is faulty, then the other intentions are going to come through. She didn't really want to hurt anybody. And so that's why in those situations she couldn't.
Well, the other witch even warned her.
Yeah.
She's like, maybe you probably shouldn't be messing with certain love magic if you're going to be like wanting certain things.
And
he,
love
like, does
magic is so chaotic and it's so unpredictable, and it has a lot to do with just the unique perceptions of love and, again, of beauty. And that's seen in the way that everyone reacts to certain situations, how the deputy reacted, or detective reacted versus how the other men had reacted.
There is that like one scene where he does try to like protect the witches too, though. Like, we're not gonna mess with these cults.
Yeah.
We're gonna let them do their own thing. They're not hurting anybody. And the guy's like, is it because you're sleeping with one?
Right.
Like, shit.
That's pretty funny though. He calls him on it.
Well, with that being said, do you guys have any final thoughts about this film?
I think it's a stunning movie for something that was released in 2016. It hits every expectation of the genre and the ideals that inspired it, whether it be from the 1950s, 70s, or fairy tale from before. And so I think it hits on all the notes, and I think it's an excellent film from the director, and I am ecstatic to see what she comes out with next. I think that she got a lot of points across, and this is just a homage to everything like witchcraft in the new modern age. And I think if you practice witchcraft or paganism, you will have a love and respect for this movie because it does pay good tribute to it.
The colors are one thing that really struck me about this one. The choice of colors, the feathering of lights and things like that in certain scenes, the meshing of her like little fairy, like 60s fairy tale world with like the modern era, all being sort of in that same color palette, really struck me with this movie, as well as a lot of the social commentary that she's discussing is very subtle. it doesn't feel so in your face that you're literally like that there, because we just did a deep analysis on it, but while you could just passively watch this and not even consider those ideas, and I would generally think you'd probably still enjoy it.
Definitely.
Overall.
Nothing but respect for somebody who shoots on old school film, especially 35 millimeter, and then cutting it yourself with the negatives. That shit's fucking hard. Using even like modern equipment to do something like that, it's a very tedious process. So for her to do all of that to create the effect instead of just using a filter over the top of it says a lot about her as a filmmaker. So definitely excited to see what else she's going to make. So go and watch it, because it's worth, watching a specifically original film like this in a group of films that you might see that are not original and are pretty lame. This one and The Neon Demon they're spot on for what they were trying to tell you.
Definitely. So do you guys have any favorite scenes from these movies? I'll start. I personally loved the diner scene in The Neon Demon where they're having the conversation about beauty, because I feel like that is a perspective that isn't really considered acceptable for a lot of people, to accept the sort of shallowness that comes with beauty. But there's also something so deep about beauty as well that isn't mentioned. It's such a complex topic that deeming it simply as something that is shallow and vapid is not really doing it justice. And I like that they really played on, well, if she wasn't beautiful, would you even take a second look at her? That's something I wish a lot of people would ask when it comes to how they perceive people presenting their own beauty.
Favorite scenes? If we're going for, let's see, The Neon Demon, it has to be the runway scene.
That's mine too.
Yeah, right. I just like finessed you right there.
Wait, are you talking about the one in the black or the one prior, before they get the shot?
I don't know, the black one with all the triangles. That's the runway scene to me.
Okay.
Yeah, the black one with the triangles and where her head's like kaleidoscope. That's like all that. I loved all of that, and I loved that it didn't take me too long to even figure out what they were conveying. It was such like a
minimalist.
A minimalist shot, but it's very What's the word I use for shit like this? It's like Picasso does art like this. What the fuck is that?
Cubism?
No. It's like where faces aren't really faces, but they look like faces. They're just made of shapes. Anyway, so I farted. Anyway, but regardless, on I loved that scene in the Love Witch. There's a lot of fun ones in that one, but I think it's all just like one movie, isn't it? It's all just like one scene, isn't it? The whole thing.
Yeah.
Really though, I can't think of one. I just really enjoyed that whole movie like, all the way through, but I couldn't think of like a moment that really stuck out to me because it wasn't as like fancy on the cinematography side of things. And excuse me, we're just taking up so much time. Move on with someone else.
My favorite scene in The Neon Demon is when they're doing the runway scene, but prior to the show. So when they're like, all right, model, come up, do the walk. And the fashion designer, he's not paying any attention to Sarah. He's like trying to fix his glasses or whatever.
Talk about breaking someone's spirit.
And then Jessie comes up. He is glued on her. And like that, it was very uncomfortable. But at the same time, very eye-opening.
I gotta say, her walk sucked.
Yeah.
I think it sucked.
Yeah.
I didn't think she was very good at doing the walk. She just happened to have a specific look. And he was like, I like that. Let's put you in the show.
That's what I'm saying, though. Like how brutal that is.
Yeah.
And then for the Love Witch, I'd have to say just the entire, like, I'm not going to give it to a scene. I'm going to give it to the set design of her room.
Oh,
it is beautiful. It is stunning how she makes her own potions, her love bottles, how she, like, paints these massive pieces that are stunning and just great in every way, how one's stabbing a dude's heart out. The other, I mean, it's just every color and everything that is in that room stands out, and you want to be there. You want to look at it all.
I would say for the Neon Demon, it's the suspension, like bondage show that they get to see, in what I can only assume is like a warehouse or something, where all you can see is the strobing lights and you get to see like the visuals on each character's face. They change slightly as the strobe comes on and off. And that's such like a good moment because you kind of have this spatial awareness of where they're all placed within the room and like sort of their relationship to each other, in addition to using like a specific color and then what normally people would not see in a situation as being normal, which is the idea of this being a part of a show, like the bondage and the suspension and whatnot. So that one was really fucking good, and it sets such a good tone for the beginning of the film. And then of course the runway scene is like that is such a good aesthetically, like it's just good cinema. It's a good storytelling element. Huh?
The fucking music.
And then of course the music that they play during
yeah.
How did we forget to mention how great the soundtrack is in the Neon Demon? 'Cause
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like definitely one of the highlights.
Yeah,
Easily.
the music during the whole thing is just so well chosen, and so that was definitely like one of the most appealing things for it. And then for the Love Witch, it's actually for me when she decides that she's just gonna take this dude back to whatever place he owns, and is just like and like she sets the parameters and the terms for everything.
Cliff Martinez is the
nice.
composer for the music. Yeah.
Okay. And just how she sort of takes control of that situation and sort of like sets boundaries for herself and like what she wants and when it's going to happen. And then continues to do pretty much what she wants after that, where she's like, I'm going to go downstairs and smoke a cigarette and like sleep on the couch, but I'll still make you breakfast. And like wakes up, cooks some food. She's like, are you feeling all right? Like, you cool? And then he fucking dies. So she's like, oh, well, all right. And then just keeps going on with her
I'll
fucking
just
life.
bury you.
Yeah,
Casual.
like buries him. So it's like, it was such a role reversal in addition to just like the way she was able to control the situation was a refreshing change on what you normally see happen to women in film. So I enjoyed that whole bit. And then they're both unique in themselves for what they are. So I would highly recommend going to watch both of them.
Final ratings?
They're both 8s. They're both good. They are good movies. We've gushed about them. They're good.
Yeah.
Go watch them.
Go watch them.
It makes you uncomfortable in different ways. It makes you think about things in different ways. Don't be a fucking simp.
I'm going to say a 7.5 for both of them, just because there's moments where I think the acting is a little bit shoddy. I think that there's dialogue that could have been addressed a little bit better. But otherwise, no, they're both, but I loved both of them. This doesn't mean that I dislike them by any chance, but I also think they could have done some things better.
I would give the Neon Demon a 7. I think it's beautiful visual and the storyline is interesting. The only thing I would ask is definitely more character development. I wish I knew the characters more. I think that was sort of the point, is that these people are playing archetypes rather than actual people. However, I personally would have wanted a little more development with the characters there. And then I would give the Love Witch an 8 because it's also absolutely gorgeous and so well crafted. I think it was a little longer than it needed to, but then again, it was done in the style of 60s Technicolor, and those movies were always stupid long, so it makes sense.
I would give the Neon Demon like an 8.5. I think it was stunning as a piece of cinematography for what you get to see as far as what's going on with the symbology and what's going on. The only reason why it doesn't have a higher rating is because, like you guys mentioned, it's not an easily accessible movie if you're just a casual moviegoer. If you go and watch the Neon Demon, you might not get a lot of what's going on, and that's probably why I would give it an 8.5 instead of like a perfect score. And then The Love Witch, I'll give a 9 because I think it's such a great piece of like what you can do as a filmmaker with what exists already. So you've seen all the things that are tropes within the movie, but they're subverted at every single turn. There's not a single thing in there that she used that is exactly as it existed before the film was made. And so she was able to create something that's unique and originally hers, and nobody else will probably be able to do that like pretty much ever after this movie is made. And she was just so involved with it that like the respect is there as like a director. And then she did directing, editing, producing it, writing it, like
costume
it's just so
design,
much.
Set design. She scored it as well. She made the music. Bruh, she did
like,
a lot.
She took everything from her brain to paper to something that was tangible, and that is very hard to do as a creative. So that's why I rate it so highly, and you should definitely go watch it.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you guys for coming out and talking about these movies with me. So as you know, we can be found on most social medias, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can listen to this podcast anywhere that you stream podcasts. Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio. Just look for us. We are BDTGH. Did I get that right? I never get that right. And yeah, go listen to us. And if you like what we do and you want a little bit more of us, check out our Patreon page. That's where you can directly support the movement that we are doing here, the movement of film analysis. Pretty soon, we're going to start releasing weekly episodes where we ourselves will be talking about certain topics, these little side things that are only available on the Patreon. You can also get little blooper reels and fun little things on the Patreon as well. So go there, give us a little money, and help us do what we do. Yeah, so thank you guys. I'm Justine.
I'm Mitch.
I'm Murr.
And I'm Jonathan. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah.